Once, there was a man named Arjun who dreamed of achieving something great in life. He had grown up with hopes and ambitions, believing that hard work would bring success. He dreamed of becoming a renowned scientist, pouring all his energy into studying, but despite years of effort, he failed every major exam he attempted. Each failure chipped away at his confidence, making the once burning passion within him fade. Arjun had a girlfriend, Maya, who had stood by his side for years. She was his only source of light in an otherwise dark and lonely world. But as time went by, Maya grew distant. She had her own dreams and aspirations, and slowly, she began to see Arjun as a burden. One day, without any warning, she left him. Her parting words echoed in his mind. "You've changed. I can't keep waiting for you to succeed while life passes me by." After Maya left, Arjun spiraled deeper into despair. His parents, once proud of his potential, now looked at him with disappointment. They didn't say much, but their silence spoke louder than words. They began to refer to him as the lost son, the one who couldn't fulfill his own dreams or live up to their expectations. Every conversation with them was filled with tension, pity, and subtle resentment. It felt like even the people who were supposed to love him unconditionally had given up. The weight of failure crushed him. Everywhere he looked, he saw the remnants of what could have been: friends who were now successful, colleagues who had moved on, and the haunting memory of Maya who seemed happier without him. His life had become an endless loop of regret and missed opportunities. One cold evening, Arjun sat alone in his dimly lit room, staring at the pile of rejected job applications and exam result slips scattered on the floor. He felt hollow, as if all the dreams and hopes he once held had withered away, leaving behind an empty shell. The loneliness was unbearable, and the thought of another day felt like too much to handle. He reached for an old, dusty notebook where he once wrote down all his dreams. His handwriting was full of life back then, full of optimism and purpose. But now, those words seemed like a cruel reminder of how far he had fallen. With tears in his eyes, Arjun penned his final note. It wasn't long, just a few words. "I tried, but I wasn't enough." He folded the note carefully, placing it on his desk beside a framed photograph of him and Maya, taken during happier times. That night, Arjun made a decision. He walked to the edge of a nearby bridge, where the rushing waters below reflected the moonlight in a way that felt hauntingly peaceful. As the cold wind bit at his skin, he took one last look at the world around him. The stars, the city lights in the distance, it all seemed so far away, so unreachable. With a heavy heart and no more dreams left to chase, Arjun stepped forward, letting the darkness engulf him. His note was found the next morning, a sad testament to a life full of potential that had been swallowed by despair. And just like that, Arjun's story ended, not with the success he had once envisioned, but with the quiet, tragic surrender of a man who believed he had no more fight left in him. Months after Arjun's tragic death, the world around him continued to move on, as it always does. But in the aftermath of his decision, there were ripples that no one could have anticipated. Arjun's parents, who had once called him their lost son, were broken beyond repair. The day they found his note, everything shifted. Their disappointment turned to unbearable grief. The unspoken words between them, the things they wished they had said, clung to their hearts like anchors. His mother, once stern and critical, crumbled into a shell of herself. She no longer had anyone to scold, to criticize, or even to love. She spent her days staring at his childhood photos, wondering if she had ever really understood him. His father, who had always remained silent and distanced, was crushed by guilt. He realized too late that the pressure he placed on Arjun to succeed had weighed on him far more than he knew. Every night, he lay awake, haunted by thoughts of how things might have been different if he had told Arjun that he was proud of him, regardless of his failures. But now, those words would never be heard. Maya, the girl who had left Arjun believing he would move on, was devastated when she heard the news. She hadn't truly understood how deep his struggles were, nor did she realize the role she had played in his final decision. For weeks, she couldn't sleep, tortured by memories of their time together. She had left him because she thought it was best for both of them, but now she felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. She replayed every conversation they had, wondering if her words had pushed him over the edge. The life she had envisioned for herself seemed pointless now, shadowed by the weight of his death. But the greatest tragedy of all was that Arjun never got to see how close he had been to turning his life around. Just 2 weeks after his death, a letter arrived at his parents' home. It was an acceptance letter from a job he had applied for months ago, a position at a research institute that had finally recognized his potential. It was a modest start, but it could have been the break he had been waiting for. The one opportunity that might have reignited the fire in him, giving him the chance to rebuild his confidence and work towards his dreams again. But Arjun would never know. Had he held on just a little longer, had he reached out for help instead of giving up, his life might have taken a different path. He might have seen that failure is not the end, but a step toward growth. That his worth wasn't tied to his accomplishments or the validation of others. He might have realized that even in the darkest times, there are people who care, people who, though they may not always express it perfectly, love him deeply. The truth was, Arjun's parents loved him, even if they didn't know how to show it. They had simply gotten lost in their own expectations, forgetting that their son's happiness mattered more than any achievement. Maya, too, had cared deeply, but she was only human, flawed in her understanding of his pain. And the world, vast and unpredictable, was full of second chances, chances Arjun never gave himself. In the months following his death, his friends, family, and even distant acquaintances reflected on the fragility of life. His story became a cautionary tale, one that reminded everyone how dangerous it is to give up too soon, to let despair cloud the possibility of a better tomorrow. The world that Arjun had felt so distant from continued spinning, but those who knew him would always carry the weight of his loss. His absence left a void in the lives of those who loved him, a void that no amount of time could ever fill. The sad truth was, Arjun's decision to end his life was based on a moment of despair, a temporary feeling that led to a permanent solution. If only he had known that things would have gotten better, even if slowly, even if imperfectly. If only he had realized that failures aren't final, and that every new day offers the possibility of change. In the end, Arjun didn't fail at life. He only failed to see that life was still full of possibilities waiting to unfold.